Do you know that every book offers the reader a promise? And in this video, we're going to look at what the promise is of memoir and what is the promise of your memoir. Hello, I'm Brenda. This is Write Your Story, and I love to help you to write your memoir. So what is the promise of your memoir? I decided to do a video on this topic because this week I'm being interviewed with regard to my memoir, When God Says No. And I know that one of the questions the interviewer is going to ask me is, what is the promise of my memoir? What is the promise of my book? What is a promise when a writer writes a book? The promise of your memoir comes down to this. There's something that you did not know that you do know now. And what is that? What is that something about your life that you now know that you want to explain and tell the reader? When we have that element in our memoir, we actually then have the element that shifts our memoir from being all about us to being of interest to somebody else. How do we find this one thing in our life that we want to share with somebody else, or this promise that we want our book to be about? I think the first place to start is to always ask ourselves, why are we writing this book? What is the essence of this book all about? Knowing why we want to write this book will also reveal its theme. If you haven't yet seen my video on determining the theme of your memoir, then do take a look at this video. It's a good place to start. But essentially, all of us want to write a memoir for some reason. There's something we're wanting to unpack, something we're wanting to explore about our lives. And what is the truth, or what is the main story in that we can now share with the reader? What did we learn? What can we transfer to the reader? What can we use our life to illustrate? And that becomes our promise to the reader. The promise is that once you've read my story, once you've got to the end of my book, this is what I wanted to teach you. This is what I wanted to show you. This is what I wanted to explain to you. So let me give you an example from my book. With regard to my book and this interview and preparing for it, I know with the question of what is the promise of my memoir, it's going to be this. My memoir is a grief memoir that unpacks the parent-child relationship. And in my memoir, I want to show and illustrate to others that if you can find a way to engage grief and hard emotions constructively, you will find your way to the light again. That is the promise of my memoir. At the end of my memoir, by the time you have finished reading it, that is the promise that I will convey to you. And I will use my life to illustrate how I achieved that, and so can you. That is the promise of my memoir. So what is the promise of your memoir? When you look at your story, if you've already written it and you're trying to edit it and find your way forward with it, look at the question of what is your story about? What is it that you want to convey to the reader? Now, these are great questions to ask before you start writing your memoir. As you write your story, keep asking yourself, what is this about? What is the story about? As you do your grocery shopping, let it go round and round in your mind. Let it just simmer and stew there, and ask yourself continually, what is this about? What is the promise of my memoir? The sooner we know the answer to that question, the sooner we will have clarity when writing our memoir. But we all have a different way and a different process of approaching our work. And so don't get so hung up on it if you don't have that question answered right at the beginning. I had a consultation recently with a client who was really stuck on trying to determine what the theme was of his memoir, and he felt he couldn't get started till he knew what that was. And yet I encouraged him to get started, find the theme as you write your memoir, because he already had a lot stirring up inside of him, but he had a blockage not knowing what the theme was of his memoir and what the promise was of his memoir. So get started in writing your memoir, have this as a focus, and constantly apply it as you write your memoir. Another key element about promise is stick to one promise. Don't make multiple promises to your reader. Choose one focus, one promise, one area that you're going to discuss in your life. And that's not to say we don't have themes and sub-themes, but what you want to have is one promise. Distill what your book is about to one promise. Now, you may ask the question, what is the difference between the promise of your memoir and the premise of your memoir? Well, promise and premise are really closely related. They sound alike and there's only one letter difference between them, and they actually work together. If you haven't yet seen my video on how to determine the premise of your memoir, do look in the links below and subscribe to get this free video in helping you to determine the premise of your memoir. But keep in mind that promise is really the conclusion. Promise is the end result of the story you are going to explain to your reader and you're going to take your reader on. So what is the promise of your memoir? If you have that clear in your mind and you're willing to share it, please do put it in the comments below. I will see you in my next video as we continue to talk about how to write our memoirs.